The privatisation of prisons and the creation of a for-profit industry out of criminal reform is a murky water of ethical and moral contradictions, with responsibility for the lives of people condemned by the state intermixed with the requirement to return and proliferate investment. It is a serious matter filled with potentially dark and disturbing turns. One thing that prison architects should be congratulated for is that it does not shy away from this at all, whilst not actually making it a part of any story, message, or commentary. Instead, it is as naturally inherent in the gameplay and the tasks at hand of creating, running, and in some cases, executing large-scale incarceration. As a sandbox game, Prison Architect is an unwieldy beast of a simulator, taking cues from many great isometric-based construction games, like Bullfrog's Theme Hospital and Dungeon Keeper. What this console version has been able to do is remove some of that complexity behind the game's accessibility. We ran a really interesting interview on the site that you can read over at insertdisc.co.uk with Introversion and Double Fine. The studio also coincidentally converted Goat Simulator for consoles, and we talked about the tasks and struggles behind adopting a menu or user interface system for consoles. Because when we look at ports of strategy games on consoles, this is what we really judge the game on. Do we get the same level of enjoyment and challenge from a game with a different or adapted control input, and how much does that affect the game that you are playing? In this case, the answer is initially, yes, you do get the same. The game functions as it normally does, the controllers are great for planning rooms and positioning objects, the menu systems are easily navigable even if, like me, you get a bit too attached to using the bumper buttons on the menu screens and have to untrain yourself, and having everything selectable from the D-pad and the game's speed controls from the triangle button is absolutely brilliant. And there is no doubt that the game is a direct port of its PC cousin. Nothing is taken out, transposed, or even altered in any way. There are the 5 training campaign missions which teach you the basics of running a prison under various strains like riots, the need to build an execution chamber, and rebuilding to cater or blatantly ignore the needs of your prisoners. You can start from scratch or from a pre-built prison, including those featured in the World of Warden's community sharing areas. Once you've decided your approach, you can then adapt the difficulty to what you want and modify the game as you see fit for things like Fog of War or prison gangs. And that's it, you're away, and it's intuitive, at least to start with. As more complex things happen or situations arise that demand more response from you, the harder the game sadly becomes to control. Of course, part of the difficulty of the game is the issues that come from such precise micromanagement. But even with the sensitivity increased, the game moves at a pace and at a scale that the controller input finds difficult to cope with compared to a mouse and a keyboard. The game also gets a tad glitchy at times. I've had to restart the campaign missions quite a few times because guards were getting stuck between doors and walls. Rooms were having to be assigned repeatedly in order to register as the rooms I'd selected, and even if in some cases I was doing something wrong, there was nothing to suggest that I was actually doing anything wrong. For example, where I'd placed a kitchen in one room, the actual floor plan had only registered a tiny portion of the room as that kitchen, but the game had no way to tell me that was the issue, apart from a warning triangle that had no context or anything to indicate the problem. Trying to install fridges in that kitchen took an age because, as the room was not complete, the fridges weren't registering as being in the room and therefore couldn't access any power, despite being engulfed in power connections. Then when it comes to things like selecting individuals to do certain tasks, creating groups, and even positioning guards, it all gets a little bit fiddly. It's also the one drawback with the user interface that despite everything being readily available and easy to navigate, some things are a bit too concealed in menus. For example, having to go into a sub-menu to find guard deployment when you could just hover over a cell block or select an area and hit a hot button to request it. It takes you out of the action a little bit, even though it is still happening on the screen, but it removes your response to it. It's a BAFTA award-winning game and it's easy to see why it's been so successful. However, it takes a lot of time and effort to get into the nuances of its tools and even some time memorising where everything is so that you can react quickly should problems occur. It's done very well in shedding the constrictions that mouse and keyboard games normally have when they come to console, and as well as a complex menu system that's been well adapted given its depth. But the enjoyment comes from not only getting everything right, but also by securing the perfect equilibrium of harmony and balance in your prisoners. You begin to take their welfare rather personally. You react personally should they riot, and you have to question your own ethics within this roleplay as to where you stand on the masses of little orange-suited blobs with incredible user-created backstories that, unless you investigate them yourself, you know nothing about. Are they dollar signs for the coffers, or people in need of reform? Prison Architect gives you the tools and the sandbox to create your own answers to complex questions without leading you in any way. And although it doesn't do it as smoothly, or without logistical difficulty compared to its PC cousin, it does make the transfer to console very well, and it is an interesting game for the more hardcore of the simulation genre players out there. For more articles and videos like this, please visit insertdisc.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at InsertDiscUK.